Question 275. You have several hundred microservice applications running in a Google Kubernetes Engine (GKE) cluster. Each microservice is a deployment with resource limits configured for each container in the deployment. You've observed that the resource limits for memory and CPU are not appropriately set for many of the microservices. You want to ensure that each microservice has right-sized limits for memory and CPU. What should you do? A. Configure a vertical pod autoscaler for each microservice. B. Modify the cluster's node pool machine type and choose a machine type with more memory and CPU. C. Configure a horizontal pod autoscaler for each microservice. D. Configure GKE cluster autoscaling. The correct answer is A. Configure a vertical pod autoscaler for each microservice. Explanation. 1. Vertical pod autoscaler, VPA. VPA adjusts the resource requests and limits for containers in your pods based on observed usage over time. It ensures that each microservice has the right-sized memory and CPU limits by automatically tuning the resource allocation. This is the best solution for optimizing resource limits without requiring manual adjustments. 2. Why not other options? B. Modify the cluster's node pool machine type and choose a machine type with more memory and CPU. Changing the node pool machine type affects the underlying infrastructure but does not address misconfigured resource limits at the pod level. It could lead to underutilization or over-provisioning of resources. C. Configure a horizontal pod autoscaler for each microservice. Horizontal pod autoscaler, HPA, scales the number of pods based on CPU or memory usage but does not adjust resource limits for individual pods. This doesn't solve the issue of incorrect resource limits. D. Configure GKE cluster autoscaling. Cluster autoscaling scales the number of nodes in the cluster based on workload demand but does not address pod-level resource misconfigurations. Steps to implement vertical pod autoscaler. 1. Install VPA. Use the following command to install VPA. kubectl apply fhttps://github.com/kubernetes/autoscaler/releases/download/vertical-pod-autoscaler.yaml. 2. Configure VPA for each microservice. 3. Monitor and adjust. Use Kubernetes metrics and logs to monitor the VPA's performance and ensure it optimally adjusts the resource limits. Conclusion. Configuring a vertical pod autoscaler, VPA, ensures that each microservice has the appropriate memory and CPU limits based on real-time usage patterns, which is the most efficient way to address this problem.